Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today live for Scotweek's event with Robert the Bruce. Today, right now, we have star Zach Mcgowan. Hi, Zach.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, Zach. Looks like you're having fun.
I am. It's really nice up here. It's beautiful. I got a nice little breeze and some good service, so it works out.
And where are you joining us from today, Zach?
I'm in Long Island. I'm joining you from
Long Island. Oh, lucky you. Lucky you. So, Zach, how did Robert the Bruce come to you? What is that story?
Well, basically, me and Richie, the director, had been trying to, to connect on a project for a number of years. I'd seen some of his movies and enjoyed them, and he'd seen some of my work and enjoyed it, and we'd become friends in LA. But every kind of time he was making a movie, I was, already on contract on something else, and it's a tough part of being an actor where you're like constantly like you want to do something but you can't, and then you want to do something and they don't want you. It's like a whole dance that you play. And so I was doing another project. It was actually in South Africa shooting, and Richie sent me the script. This is probably, I don't know, like 2 months before it started shooting, 3 months, somewhere in there. And he sent me the script, and he was like, hey, what do you think of this script? And I read it, and I didn't know what part, was in it. I was like, it's great. I'd love to play Robert the Bruce. And he was like, no, we have Robert. We're looking for this part. And I was like, shit, great. I'd love to play that part. I wasn't really, with independent movies, you're never quite sure whether they're going to happen or not. That's just part of, like, as an actor, you experiencing it so many times. Like, you're like, yes, I'd love to make that movie when it's time, when it actually is, when you actually need me to be there. A lot of times they need, like, other people earlier on to make movies, and not necessarily an actor. They're trying to get it made and trying to get it happening. So he was in that stage, and he was like, it's going to happen. And I was like, cool, I'm excited. And sure enough, I finished the project I was on, and I think there was like 2 weeks or a week or something between them. And it, like, there was like contracts, and like we were going to be making the movie. And I was like, I'm so excited. And Richie was like, so, mate, we haven't talked about accent, but it's all Scottish. I was like, of course I know it's Scottish accent. I've been working on a Scottish accent since the mid-'90s. And he was very excited about that. And I literally showed up in Montana, I think, just days before I started shooting, and actually worked. Shores was an amazing person to have there, because I think everyone was a little bit, there was just elements that they weren't sure about. Like, some people didn't know how to pronounce my character's name. Like, there was things like that that are difficult in film production, where he was super helpful, and he actually gave me a lot of confidence in what I was doing, because I was like, all right, there's a Scottish person here. You, Shores, can you help me? And he was like, yeah. He was like, what do you want help with? I was like, we're just going to work together on this, and you tell me every time it sounds like, stupid. And he drilled me a lot on stuff, and we just kept kind of working towards it. And I'm very proud of how the movie came out. It's really, really a beautiful film, and all things considered, I think it's been tremendously successful, and it's a tremendous project. I'm just excited to have been a part of it.
Oh my goodness. Well, how do you pronounce your character's name?
Well, so there are a couple of different people who have yielded their opinion on that. But for the movie's purpose, it just went on as Brandubh, was the name that was how it got pronounced. And some of those elements in movie making, I'm kind of familiar with from past period pieces I've done, where everyone's very opinionated about specific, like on Black Sails, most of the people on the project were English, and I was an American doing an English accent. But then there were names of things that are not English words, but are words from the New World. And so like there was confusion on how to say the island of Nassau. A lot of the English actors wanted to call it Nassau, or some sort of version of that. And so, you know, I've learned how that goes, and you do your best, and you figure out the consensus, and then sometimes in ADR you change
it. That's incredible. And you've done a lot of different types of accents, Russian, Romani,
Yeah.
various different types of American diasporas.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done a lot. I think some actors don't like to work in accents. Some do. I think I'm one that does. I've learned early on in my life that I'm what they call phonically sympathetic. So I to start speaking like people who are around me anyway. If I spend enough time in any place, I'll just kind of start picking that up, and so that kind of happens too. So yeah, I've been lucky that I guess I've either been lucky enough or unlucky enough that people cast me a lot doing accent work. So I love it. I can also speak in my own accent, but I'm happy to speak in other accents. It's kind of the way I look at it.
That's awesome. And just a little bit tangent. So I did some research on you, and I saw that you went to Carleton College in Minnesota.
Yeah, I did.
That's awesome. So I went to Lawrence University in Wisconsin, so we competed against you.
There you go.
There you go. But what was that like going from New York to Minnesota, and how was it going to Carleton?
I loved Carleton. It was a great experience. You know, obviously it's a great school. When I got in, it was kind of the best one that I got into, so it kind of wasn't much of a choice. They liked me for a lot of reasons, I guess. There was a lot of kids in my high school actually who wanted to go to that school and didn't get in, and I had my first spate with like envy and like people like hating you because of your success. Like when that happened, because I wasn't the kind of student who was like, I wasn't like always in the classroom trying to like do exactly what the specific path that you're supposed to go on. Like I wasn't that guy. Like I was like, you know, I was really good at running the football on the football team, and I was, you know, really good in the musical, and I was involved in a lot of extracurricular, and I also did school, you know, I did a lot of school stuff. So I think I got in there, and that was pretty cool. I loved going there. I met my wife there. In fact, when you go to Carleton, they put you all in like a big auditorium kind of thing. I think it's actually in a theater of it. And they have you look around at all the students, and they're like, look around. I forget the percentage, but they're like, half of you are going to marry someone in this room who you don't know yet. And I'm from New York. I don't know, come on now. And sure enough, here we are 20 years later. And she was in that room, and I didn't know her then. So, yeah. So I loved Carleton. It was a great place for me to play both sports and do theater. I even made my first movie in Carleton on Carleton equipment, which was really cool. So yeah, as far as going to Minnesota from New York, though, there was a lot of changes for me. Like, you know, like New York, I grew up in the 90s in New York. So like the idea that there wasn't that much that I wasn't like introduced to in New York growing up. But I think the thing that I wasn't introduced to, if anything, was middle America. And as someone who grew up in New York and spent a lot of time in California because I had family there, and I kind of flew over these states, I think it was a really important experience for me to spend time there and start understanding that world more. And I think it's actually, I mean, it's a big issue. It's a bigger issue societally right now, but there's like two Americas in many ways. And I think it was really great for me to experience that America and fall in love with that America as well. Because I was already in love with the kind of the coasts and all that. So, you know, it was a tremendous cultural experience. I went ice fishing, and I learned how to survive in the cold. And, you know, I learned that you can get lost in a cornfield. Definitely that can happen. And I learned all kinds of things. I had great teachers there. It's a great theater program and great academics. And I had a blast. Carleton.
That's fantastic. And I think, I wanted to just ask you a couple of questions that I don't know if everyone knows, that the body of the work that you have done. I mean, you've been on Black Cells, Shameless, Agents of the Shield, Scorpion King. And I actually didn't realize that you do all of your own stunt work.
Yeah, I would. It's too fun to let someone else do it.
What is the scariest thing that have you ever been like, OMG, I could die right now? I mean, have you ever had a fear? What is the scariest thing you've done?
No, I mean, the scariest thing that you usually do in stunt work is you have to fight another actor who's not on target with punching. That's general. I mean, there's plenty of like really crazy things that you do, but those things are actually very mitigated and controlled via insurance and all kinds of things that generally speaking, they're not really putting you in danger in most stunt work. Yes and no. I mean, it depends on what your definition of danger. I've come to understand that my definition of danger is different than other people's. So for me, like a lot of people are talking about a dangerous situation where I'm like, no, that's not what's dangerous. Like, for instance, if you're jumping from like a car to another car, like people are like, oh, this is so dangerous. We're going to tie you to this, da, 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 da. And you're like, what's dangerous is I'm not driving the car. So if you tie me to it, then that person goes out of control. Then I'm going to be spinning around here and hitting everything. I'd rather just, if he goes out of control, I'll jump off the car and I'll roll to safety. And people look at you like you're crazy. But then, then like on Maze Runner, a kid gets his face bushed apart because he gets tethered to a car. So those kind of things I think are kind of extra, those are discussions where normally you don't even get the choice to whether or not to do it. But generally speaking, anytime I'm fighting a stuntman, I'm never worried, because I know that or a stunt woman, they're always generally very, very on point, and they would never hurt you or whatnot. But a lot of actors punch me in the face, for sure.
Oh my God. Like who? Who's punched you in the face?
The way it always works is you give them the first time for free, and then you tell them what's going to happen the second time, and then you know what happens the second time. But I not to badmouth actors, but I try to, I train in that kind of stuff. So I don't think people should do that unless, like, if you can't like punch the phone and not hit it, then don't be punching at human faces, because you're going to hit it, That's the way I look at it.
That's a great point.
Like that you've kept your beautiful hat, so you want a few of those down.
Oh, I don't know. My face is, I think, mostly a product of being punched in the face a lot. I don't know if it's how beautiful it is. I'm the youngest of three boys, so I've been hit a lot in my life. I'm okay with it.
Gosh, you've had practice. Well, tell me, what was it like filming in Montana? Because watching the film, it looked like it was freaking cold. So
it was definitely cold. It was definitely cold in Montana. I'd been coming from South African summer, where it was like really, really hot. So I was actually shooting Scorpion King before I came. So it was like 110 degrees where I was. I went back to LA, had Christmas, and then went to Montana and showed up in Montana. I guess that was like late December, because I think I started shooting like the first day or the second day of the year. It was very cold. I think I was lucky in that part of my training in being an actor is that, like, I essentially train for the war of attrition, which acting is. So, like, put me in the worst environment ever, where everyone else is having trouble, and then I'm like a pig in shit. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be fine here. Because generally speaking, like, I know that my breaking point is so far beyond most others that, like, I knew, like, so I was never really that cold, to be honest. Like, I was okay. But
wow.
There was a lot of people who were cold, so there was a lot of things done. Like, there was tents made with warming stuff, and like, whenever there's warming tents, I don't go in the warming tents, because, like, I feel like I get warm in there, and I'm like, oh, and then I get out and I feel cold. Whereas if I just stay out, I'm just like handle it. So yeah, it was cold, but you know, it's cold in Montana. Anyone expecting Montana to not be cold in January or February, they got to read more.
Well, did it feel like you were in Scotland? Could you get into character because it felt like it, or what was that like?
Well, I think that environment can always aid your character, because it always gives you something to use, where you may not have much to do in a particular scene. Struggling with an environment itself can be something to do. It's something that we all do consistently in our lives. Wherever we are, there's a temperature, a weather that's going on. And since for me, like as an actor, whenever the temperature is what it's supposed to be, then it's easy, because then I don't have to act. Like, because it's cold, we're supposed to be cold. It works, right? We're in the mountains of Scotland. It's supposed to be really cold up here. The hard part becomes when you're doing like a movie and it's hot, but you're supposed to be cold, where it's cold and you're supposed to be hot. That's where it starts getting tough.
Absolutely. I definitely know what that's like.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Tell us a little bit about, do you have Scottish roots? Do you have a heritage from Scotland? Any connections there for you?
For me, I mean, not necessarily Scotland. I'm an Irish citizen. I'm a dual citizen, American and Irish. And according to Shores Wallace, the McGowans of Ireland actually are of Scottish descent and came to Ireland to help fight the English in Ireland many, many moons ago and whatnot. So in that way, I felt that connection that he kind of let me know. But I've always felt a connection to all things Celtic. You know, growing up, I grew up in an Irish bar in New York City called Mcgowan's that my family ran. So it was, and you know, having been to Scotland and been to Ireland, you know, they're obviously very different, but they're also very similar. There's a lot of similar cultural elements to it, and you know, I like whiskey, whether it comes from, you know, this place or that place. You know, it tastes good to me either way. You know, so yeah, I definitely do have a big connection to that culture, and specifically, I think, you know, Braveheart was like a big movie for me growing up. It came out when I was, you know, just kind of like growing up to that point where I wanted to hear and see those kind of stories, and those kind of themes became important to me. So like, you know, for instance, like my football team in high school, we would watch Braveheart before every game. So I watched it like, you know, 10 times a season for 4 seasons. And so obviously being a part of any bit of that legacy has always been like a dream to me, and something that, you know, so in many ways, like being a part of the Bruce was like essentially a dream come true, and to get to act opposite, you know, Angus, who essentially in many ways is, you know, it's hard to actually say who Braveheart is actually a story about, in some ways when you watch it. You know, he's narrating the tale, he's playing the king, but you're watching William and whatnot. So either way, it was, you know, it was great to be a part of that, and I think I've always felt a connection to, you know, to that world. I've always kind of, amongst my friends and family, they always joke that I was born in like the wrong century and time. And I always feel that way a lot, you know, so to me, it's not that, like, a lot of people like, oh, how do you delve? I'm like, all I have to do is stop pretending to be this guy. You know,
that is you.
You know, yeah. So I fall easily into the kind of warrior stat things because I don't know, maybe I'm reincarnated. I don't know, something like that.
No, that's lovely. And I know, you know, my family comes from the north of Scotland, and I have so many family members in connection there, and we've been talking with people about this movie, Robert the Bruce, and I feel like for the Scottish people, it's been very special. They've been very touched by this film, It was shown in Glasgow, and people came out.
I was there. I was there when it was in Glasgow.
The people were in tears, I guess, and very emotional about it. And the Scottish people were very touched by what you all did on this film.
Well, it was as Richie likes to say, it was a love note to Scotland, I think. And anytime you do something like this and it gets embraced by the actual communities that are involved in these tales and in these histories and in these stories, there's an added, there's just something added to that. There's nothing worse than like you're making a movie about Scotland and like the Scottish are rioting about you in this movie, and you're like, I just trying to make art.
What can you do? Well, we are so incredibly honored to be talking with you about this film today and getting to know you a little bit more and about your work and everything that you're doing. And we really hope to see you, if you're in Los Angeles, at Scotweek. You would be our special honored guest.
I absolutely would love to come to Scotweek. If it's next April, I mean, who knows? As long if you're allowed to hold Scotweek next April, then I will be there, because then that means that like the world is reopened and we're actually allowed to do it. And I mean, short of me being out working or something, but I live in Los Angeles, so I'm happy to come on by.
That would be fantastic, and I'll hand you my bagpipes and you can play a little bit.
I will. I'm not going to promise anything other than that I am willing to give it a try, even if I might get COVID from doing it. But I don't know if that's a good idea, but
I'll make sure they're ready to go. And if you could just sign them afterwards, I'd be so grateful.
I shall.
Zach Mcgowan, thank you so much for being here with us today. We will keep in touch with you. We will follow you, and we'll follow all of your next projects. It's always a joy to watch you on screen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zach. You take care. We'll